around the nation. TYT Nation. Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Jeff Waldorf here. Got a great show for you guys today. It's Thursday, almost the end of the week, and we've got some big news going on today. We'll start out with, of course, your normal type of Republican corruption, including stealing from Republican donors. A little bit of schadenfreude on this one, I do have to admit. But also, we'll go through it. I'll tell you how much was taken, and we'll go into all those details. So it's an interesting story. We'll start out with that. Then we've got the whistleblower for the Trump administration. A lot of unanswered questions on that. So we'll do a little speculation and have a little fun with that, especially Donald Trump's response. So that should be great. Then we are going to go into policy positions. We've got the new healthcare plan from Pete Buttigieg. Is it any good? We'll talk about it. We're going to break it down real simply from what we know, and there's not a lot of detail on it. And we'll get to my opinion on it. Then we have Bernie Sanders' housing plan. We'll break that down into detail. There's a lot of detail. It's a very comprehensive plan. So we'll break it down. We'll talk about it and see whether it's any good or not as well. And then, of course, the last segment, if we can get to it, we have a cop interrogating a black man for having the temerity to walk across a crime scene. So, no, not just walk across, walk by. Insane story. We'll talk about that as well. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to cover today on the show. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Helps us out. Also, subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell twice. Make sure you get notifications every time we go live. And we're live every 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. So it's most Mondays through Friday. So do that. Also, Patreon. So I want to thank some patrons before we get started. We'll start with Dave Stairs, David Henry Thomas Jr., David J. Lassier. Sorry, I have a tendency to butcher names. You guys, longtime viewers, you'll know that. And these are the $5 members. So those are the people who support us at around $5 a month through our Patreon page. Again, that goes a long way to help us remain on the air. So thank you very, very much for that. David Leafhopper, Dean Uhara, and Deborah. So just Deborah. Thank you, everybody, for supporting us. Patreon.com/TYTNation. There's another way to support us as well, and that's through channel membership and also buying merchandise at our Teespring. So who doesn't want to rock a cool shirt? I'm probably going to get a couple of my own here soon. Maybe for my birthday. It's coming up next week, actually. Next Friday. Okay, anyway. So there's that. Let's get into the stories. Oh, by the way, one perk for channel members is that you guys, you guys have an emoji, right? Well, TYT Nation badge, I should say. This badge, when you guys make comments, when I go to break, I read your comments on the air, and I will respond to them over other people. Now, it doesn't mean I won't respond to any other questions or comments or anything like that. But channel members always get first priority on that. And I want to try to figure out how to get channel members, not just channel members, but patrons recognized in that way as well. I just haven't figured out a way to do it yet. Okay. So let's get into the grift. Because the grift is real. Okay. Now, earlier this week, Kelly Rogers, who is a Maryland-based GOP consultant, pleaded guilty to wire fraud. So now you might not have heard about this, but I think it's important news because it shows, of course, that there's a lot of groups, a ton of groups on the right wing who take advantage of donors. And I'm not talking about the big corporate donors that the right wing tends to roll in, but there is a big cottage industry of grift on the right wing towards people who aren't necessarily of means, right? So now Rogers is a staunch right winger, right? So very, very conservative person, and he ran multiple political action committees. Now, these committees included the Conservative Majority Fund and the Tea Party Majority. You guys remember the Tea Party? Kind of like a yesterday thing or whatever, because back in 2012, you guys remember, it's a huge deal. Oh my God, the Tea Party! Look at all these Tea Party people sweeping into Congress. Biggest movement ever. They got the most, positive news coverage. And so there were basically giant stars in the right wing, but it was like an AstroTurf kind of thing. Now compare that to news coverage of people on the left. We did not get that kind of positive news coverage, even AOC, right? So the Tea Party, right? Now apparently Tea Party still has these PACs going, right? But not this one. See, according to prosecutors, Mr. Kelly, or I should say Mr. Rogers, took in about $10 million from mostly small donors over the span of a few years, about 7 years, right? So he took $10 million in order to give to conservative causes and politicians, right? Turns out, according to filings, he only dispersed about $48,400 to politicians. That's a very minuscule amount of that $10 million, not thousand, $1 million. $48,400 out of $10 million. So the question naturally is, well, where did the rest of it go? Well, it turns out, kind of went into their pockets. According to prosecutors, the rest of the money was used to pay himself and his friends, as well as settle legal fees from a state lawsuit that was investigating his political activity, all while sending emails to donors talking about how much he was doing to fight, at the time, President Barack Obama and illegal immigration. Interesting. So now, Washington Field Office Assistant Director Timothy Slater said this about Rogers, quote, "He swindled millions of dollars from individuals attempting to participate in our democratic process by giving these groups money." These, by the way, shady right-wing groups money. Now, he continued by saying, instead of using donations to provide assistance to support military veterans, as he advertised, Rogers used the money to benefit himself and his associates. So that's a common thing on the right wing, unfortunately, right? So, oh no, we support the troops, we support the veterans, we're going to raise money. Oops, looks like that money didn't go to veterans. It went into my pocket. Sad day for you. Sad day for the veterans. Now, again, this is what Rogers did. It's kind of reminiscent of what Trump had done through his charity, the Trump Foundation. They promised to get a bunch of money for veterans and send them that money. What happened? He never sent the money. So this is a pattern of right-wing grift of their own members, by the way. It's not like they're taking money from liberals or progressives or anything like that. No, they're taking money from their own base, and they're just putting it right in their pocket. Now, are we at all shocked by this? I would say no, right? Maybe you are, okay. And I can understand why if you don't pay attention to this stuff, right? But no, I'm not shocked. The fool and his money is, easily parted, as the old adage goes, right? And look, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of conservative donors out there that tend to be the biggest fools. And by that, I mean, they're easily defrauded. And that's the problem here. Okay. So now that's not me saying it. That's looking at the patterns here. Right. And I don't know if it's because most conservatives are a little bit older and therefore a little less internet savvy. I'm not saying that all old people are not internet savvy. There's some wonderful people who are incredibly knowledgeable about the internet and about scams and avoid them, who happen to be older, very much older, right? But I'm saying generally, older people tend to be defrauded a little bit easier, and a lot of older people tend to skew more conservative as well. They tend to fall for more scams. Okay, so I don't know what it is though. That's just me throwing out some ideas, but more details. Now, the original investigation of Rogers by Politico teaming up with ProPublica, which first led the FBI to raid his Maryland offices and arrest him in 2017, showed that Conservative Majority Fund relied on donor information it collected for the American Conservative Union. And this kind of shows how there's this just giant web of conservative groups all backing each other and all getting and you can see this is sort of the reason why the right seems to be so incredibly organized, because all these shady donor groups are in a way connected. They're connected to different think tanks. They're connected to different groups. They're connected by different people. They're promoted by right-wing websites. So this is a giant web, right? And so the ACU was part of this web. And so now the Conservative Majority Fund got a lot of their donor lists, their donor information from ACU. Now, ACU just happens to be the organizer of CPAC. That's interesting. So now they used the organizer to target people, specific people, to defraud out of money. Now, the ACU says, we had no idea that they were defrauding our people. We had no idea what Rogers was doing or his PACs. We didn't know. And so don't blame us. Not our fault. We just gave them the list because no, we on the right. We kind of share everything with each other and maintain sort of a more unified front that way. Look, okay, that's probably true, right? But at the same time, as I mentioned before, grifting is really rampant on the right wing. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these, or most of these, PACs and groups on the right wing are actively involved in scamming people. Let me give you an example of this, right? So now earlier this year, David Bossie's presidential coalition took in millions of dollars from donors giving less than $200 each in a single year. So now they took in all this money, millions of dollars, and they spent it on Bossie's salary, consultants, and efforts to raise more money. Now, according to IRS filings reviewed by Axios and the Campaign Legal Center, Bossie's 527 political organization raised a staggering $18.5 million between 2007 and 2018. Now, they promised the donors that the group was, quote, dedicated to identifying and supporting conservative candidates running for office at the state and local levels of government. Now, that's what they say their mission is. But their real mission was to put money in their own pockets. Of the $15.4 million that the President coalition spent during that period, only $425,442, or about 3%, were actually spent on candidates, political committees, or state and local ads supporting said candidates. 3% of the money was spent on what they said they were going to do. Where'd the rest of the money go? Well, the 97% of that money was traced going basically directly into the pockets of the political consultants, people like David Bossie. Yeah. According to IRS documents, the presidential coalition spent millions of dollars on contracts with 14 direct marketing firms to fuel their fundraising efforts, several $million more on postage to send mailers and books, and at least $1.1 million to telemarketing firms associated with InfoCision. Now, InfoCision is really interesting. They were previously accused by former employers of preying on elderly donors. And $1.2 million on donor cultivation lists. So there's another scam. Okay, then. Now, the Campaign Legal Center notes that these two firms were not alone in this scam. In fact, they say that there is a cottage industry of groups that target vulnerable communities with self-serving borderline scams. And the reason that they proliferate, by the way, is because they're super easy to set up. Now, ironically, they're very easy to set up because of Citizens United. Yeah, so Citizens United made PACs incredibly easy, dark money PACs, independent expenditures, and a whole host of corruption, as well as being able to scam people without a lot of, I guess, oversight and accountability. So that's what's going on here. Now, the reason that there's another reason too why these proliferate, and it's because you have almost no enforcement at the FEC. In fact, Republicans have essentially had the FEC on gridlock. So it doesn't function the way that it should. So it's essentially been shut down. Now, these shady groups can't wait to separate conservative donors from their money and essentially put it into their own pockets. And that's what's going on here. Now, as much schadenfreude as I get from seeing conservatives waste their money in these ridiculous PACs, right? I don't think that it's the right thing to do. And I actually believe that this situation would be solved if we were to get all the money out of politics. Period. Now, Andrew Yang, I'm no member of the Yang gang. Let's be honest. I'm for Bernie Sanders, but I think Yang had an excellent idea. It's called democracy dollars, right? And so you get so much money in democracy dollars to give to whatever candidate you choose, and that's all you get. No public financing, or I'm sorry, no private financing of election, all public financing. Wonderful. I love those ideas, right? That's one good idea to get money out of politics, and there are several others. Another one is a constitutional amendment to end Citizens United and the idea of money being speech and corporations having unlimited speech rights. That would have, and not only corporations, but unions as well. Get all the private financing out of elections and go to a completely, to a 100% public financing model for these elections. That's the best way to end this corruption. Okay. So now, at the end of the day, and the reason that I want to get all this money out of politics is because as long as you have private financing of elections, you will have these elections decided by private interests, not the people. You will have bribes. And in this case, people who use the mechanism and use this system to scam people who are vulnerable. And so I think getting the money out of politics would be a great way to end all these different scams, especially on the right, but everywhere, and actually go to democracy. Okay. Okay, let's move on. Now, the Washington Post reported on Wednesday that Trump had allegedly made a promise to a foreign leader that was regarded as so troubling by the intelligence agencies that it prompted an official to file a whistleblower complaint. So now that's really interesting, / possibly disastrous. Now, the report cited 2 anonymous former U.S. officials familiar with the matter. Now, if it's true, holy crap. A lot of questions, though. And there is a lot of speculation going on as well. Now, so far, we don't know what foreign leader Trump was speaking with. In fact, we have absolutely no information on that or what he pledged to deliver. But, and they're not even sure if he's directly involved in the matter. They will not give us any sort of information. Okay. Now, again, all we know is that there is a whistleblower that has come forward, not actually come forward in person, but all we know is this reporting. So again, this is a developing situation, right? But if Donald Trump is promising foreign leaders things that are getting people worried enough in order to file a whistleblower complaint, which we know does exist, That's not good. So now, which foreign leaders? And again, we're going to go into some speculation. But what foreign leaders would he be able to, or would he make promises to? Well, I mean, you have Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. You have Vladimir Putin, possibly Duterte of the Philippines. You know, Kim Jong Un of North Korea. We don't know. We don't know. But according to the Washington Post, it raises new questions about the president's handling of sensitive information and may further strain his relationship with U.S. spy agencies. Now, one former official also said this communication was a phone call. So apparently, he had a phone call with several leaders, or several different leaders, and one of them he promised something. Again, we don't know, but you go back and look at some of the people that he's called, and one person shows up. That's Vladimir Putin. Now, the Post notes that the president spoke or met with about at least 5 foreign leaders in the weeks preceding the complaint, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, North Korean leader Kim Jong Un, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, Emir of Qatar Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. So, I don't know. That's interesting. According to the Post, Intelligence Community Inspector General Michael Atkinson had received the whistleblower complaint on August 12th and had deemed it both credible and urgent and submitted it to his boss, Mr. McGuire. So now, here comes another part, right? And maybe the reason why so many people are outraged about this. By law, McGuire is required to transmit such complaints to Congress within 7 days. That did not happen in this case. According to the Post, he refrained from doing so after turning to legal guidance to officials at the Justice Department. Now, that is the Trump Justice Department. That's headed by William Barr. William Barr is a noted Trump defender. So he's one of the Trump sycophants who does nothing more than kiss her ass. Now, McGuire's refusal to hand over the complaint to Congress at the apparent advice of the Justice Department sparked concerns that the acting intelligence chief and the Department of Justice are subverting the law to protect President Trump from whatever possible promise he made to whatever leader. Now, legal experts said that there are scenarios in which a president's communications with a foreign leader, and generally they don't consider those communications a bad thing at all, which I understand, but there are scenarios where these communications could rise to the level of an urgent concern for the intelligence community, and that's what happened in this case. This is apparently one of those scenarios. And of course, I'm very, very concerned, especially considering how I think Putin was one of the recent people that he met with that could have sparked that complaint. Now, look, unlike the mainstream media, right? I'm not saying that Donald Trump works for Putin, right? I'm not saying that. We don't know who he made that promise to or who he talked to. But there are a lot of ties between Russia and Donald Trump. For one, he's received a lot of money from the Russians. They've had a business relationship for a very, very long time. And Trump is a deeply corrupt person. He only cares about himself and his own wealth. Is it possible that he makes promises to other countries to help boost himself or his business ties or do something from some sort of personal political gain? I think very much so. He's already directed a lot of foreign and domestic money to himself through his hotels since becoming president. He's a deeply corrupt person. Deeply corrupt person. So, look, we don't know the details on this. Too many questions, a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And I don't think we're going to get answers right off the bat. There's probably going to end up being a very long, drawn-out legal fight to see what's even in this complaint, right? And so this is the possibility of, again, maybe lasting to the election or through the election, possibly being very damaging to Trump, and I don't know what else. So it really is a very open question, and we're just going to have to wait to see what else develops. Okay. All right. Moving on. One more on this situation. Now, President Trump on Twitter had denied some claims that he had made inappropriate promises to a foreign leader in a phone call. Now, recently it was reported by the Washington Post that a whistleblower complaint was filed against the president last month, in which Acting Director of National Intelligence Joseph McGuire refuses to share with the House Intelligence Committee like he's supposed to. Now, the Washington Post cited about two former U.S. officials who say that this complaint was prompted by this phone call. So now Donald Trump responded to this in about the way you'd expect him to. He tweeted, quote, "Another fake news story out there. It never ends." I know I'm using like the wrong Trump voice because he's actually much, much softer than that. It's almost like a silky jazz smoothness to his voice. Another fake news story. Never ends. Virtually anytime I speak on the phone to a foreign leader, I understand there may be many people listening from various U.S. agencies, not to mention those from the other country itself. No problem. No problem. No, that is a problem. Now, recently we found out that the Israelis were spying on Donald Trump. I mean, they were setting up like things that would fool his cell phone into connecting to him, like fake cell towers. I mean, crazy devices, right? Uh, and that would, of course, intercept the content of people's phone calls. And that's how the Israelis would get a leg up on talking about policy with Washington, with people from the United States, that they would know things that they shouldn't actually know. And so, but of course, President Trump didn't care about that because it doesn't care about security because, oh, it's so inconvenient to him, right? Very, very inconvenient. But he continues, knowing all this, is anybody dumb enough to believe that I would say something inappropriate with a foreign leader while on such a potentially heavy populated call? I would only do what is right anyway, and only do good for the USA. Wow. Is anybody dumb enough to believe that I would say something inappropriate? No, no. Everybody out there believes he's the one that's dumb enough to do it. I mean, again, he's tweeted classified pictures from U.S. spy satellites. Right on Twitter. Remember when he was playing, he took pictures of the guy with the nuclear football at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, that was forever ago. Doesn't care. You're not supposed to let people know who's got the nuclear football. That is a huge security concern. No, got pictures of him sitting at Mar-a-Lago. Having open discussions with staff members at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, seriously, he is not a smart person. He also uses an insecure cell phone to make calls. Constantly leaks to his buddies. And, of course, probably the press. He's not a smart person. He's not a person that cares about security, and he's not very stable. He's not a very stable genius. And in fact, look, he is far worse for national security than Hillary Clinton and her private server ever was. And let's be honest about that. Okay. So, of course, naturally, after he tweets something this incredibly stupid, there were responses. One of them, Brittany, said this, turns out no one believes you. Just release the whistleblower statement then. Which would be nice. But right now, they refuse to do so. In fact, the New York Times reported that the internal watchdog for American spy agencies has declined repeatedly to disclose to lawmakers the content of that whistleblower complaint, which they are supposed to tell Congress. Michael Atkinson, Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, told lawmakers that he was unable during a hearing, and this was a closed, classified hearing, right? He told lawmakers that he was unable to confirm or deny anything about the substance of the complaint, including whether it involved the president himself. You're kidding me, right? No, not at all. Stu Cameron, back to Twitter. He said, but you say plenty of inappropriate things when everyone's watching. How can you believe, how can we believe you wouldn't be worse when speaking in relative privacy? You wouldn't be worried what staffers think anyway. He's got a point. He's got a point. Janet Johnson pointed out that he did not know who Stormy Daniels was. That's an interesting response there. Facts Do Matter also said, if you said nothing inappropriate, then there's no reason to order Barr to break the law and keep it from Congress. Tell him to hand it over. Problem solved. Unless you're lying again. Look, Trump lies all the time, even about stuff that he doesn't need to lie about. But let me go to the complaint here, right? Now, again, under the law, the complaint has to concern the existence of an intelligence activity that violates the law, rules or regulations, or otherwise amounts to mismanagement, waste, abuse, or a danger to public safety. Now, the conversation itself, not a problem. But there's something in that complaint that was so worrisome, and it has to fall under those guidelines of being disturbing or possibly violating the law to get them to file it. So now experts also keep mentioning that the president has broad authority to declassify intelligence secrets, order the intelligence community to act and otherwise direct the conduct of foreign policy as he sees fit. But there is something in there, like I said, that worried people so much. What was it to the Saudis? I don't know. I mean, he did openly say, hey, man, if the Saudis paid us, then we totally invade Iran. Yikes. And then before he, I think, walked it back, or it could be Putin. It could be anybody. It could be anybody that he's made some sort of promise to. And that has got the intelligence community incredibly concerned. So, and finally, Trump, he said this. This is a case of presidential harassment. So that's the thing he goes back to, right? No, it is potential security concern. Giving intelligence or promising something to the leader of a foreign country, we don't know who it is, but it was enough to worry people. And so this should be very, very concerning. National security. We have an idiot in charge, who I think, in my opinion, based on what I know, I think he's more than happy to sell the country for personal political gain. Now, maybe you don't believe that. Maybe you don't know. But for me, I think that is probably the case. And if so, we should be incredibly concerned and get to see what's inside of that complaint. Okay. We should know. All right. I'm going to take a break. We'll come back. We're going to go switch over to policy. We'll talk about Buttigieg, his healthcare plan, Bernie's housing plan, and more. So stay right here. We'll come back. Around the Nation. back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TOT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so I want to address something you guys said about the democracy dollars. So let me go here. Basically, it's a stopgap, right? So what it is is that while they push for the constitutional amendment, this is from Yang's site, to allow our campaign finance laws to properly limit the power of the top 1%, we should make it all possible for all Americans to contribute to the candidate they feel strongly about in order to drown out the voices of the few who can spend millions of dollars. So the $100 democracy dollars, right? While they work for a constitutional amendment. So I don't think that's a bad idea. There's a lot of stuff that I disagree with Yang on, but that's any way to try to strengthen the voice of the American voter, as opposed to, corporations and wealthy individuals, I'm in favor of. So I just wanted to go and mention that. All right. Anyway, we've got a lot to get to. So if you haven't already, please like and share the stream. And let me get to our next segment, Policy with Pete Buttigieg. I think you can see where this one's going. All right. Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg has just released his healthcare proposal. And it's not Medicare for all. I think we're not surprised by this. Now, he's calling the plan Medicare for all who want it. And what it is basically a public option plan. Now, it calls for increased subsidies for private insurance. So it's going to preserve private insurance, and it's going to open up Medicare as a public option, which you can buy into. Now, for years, he says in a statement, Washington politicians have allowed the pharmaceutical industry and giant insurance companies and powerful hospital systems to profit off people when they're at their sickest and most vulnerable. My Medicare for all who want it plan will create a healthcare system that puts power in the hands of each American. Now, how it works is that uninsured Americans would automatically be enrolled into the government insurance plan, while those with employer-provided insurance would be able to opt in. So that's how it preserves employer and private insurance, essentially. Now, the health care proposal, while it's not very detailed, includes measures to address surprise billing and an out-of-pocket spending cap for Medicare. So it keeps the Medicare program currently as it is, essentially the same, but just opens it up for the public. So now, again, public option, right? So my thoughts on this. Sorry, Pete. It's not single payer, which means it's not going to work. Now, I know some people ask, well, why? Why would a public option not work good enough? Now, look, I used to be in favor of a public option way back in 2008, 2012, right? And I was hoping that the ACA would have a public option built into it. We are way past that now. And now you realize that a public option doesn't work. It would never survive in this system where we have essentially a corrupt government. I mean, look, most of what these politicians want to do is privatize industry. They want to privatize everything. And they take money from giant corporate donors. A public option would not survive because what would happen is that insurance companies would continue to bribe politicians to try to reduce what is covered by a public option. The reason that they would do that is to try to shift as many healthy people over to a private insurance system. These insurance companies would take the healthiest people, entice them with low premiums, and for plans that wouldn't cover as much. So the difference here is that instead of uninsured people continuing to be uninsured, which is what we have during the current system, they would have Medicare, but not an expanded Medicare. So it would cover basically what it covers now. And a lot of people on Medicare have to buy supplementary plans. So no vision, no dental, nothing that Bernie Sanders promises in his expanded Medicare for all plan, right? And so what would happen here is you would end up with all the uninsured, poor, and sick people on the government option if they're not covered by their employer. And then you have all the healthy people in private insurance. You know what happens when you have something like that? You have a death spiral. It would be a death spiral in the private insurance market. Now, if it's public, it's going to be a gigantic drain on the system. And you know what that means? That means that politicians, especially Republicans, will continue to try to cut what is covered by that public option and eventually even do away with it. And look, the reason that this would not control prices, and the other argument is, well, this could you put in measures to help control prices, right? Well, this doesn't have the leverage. A public option does not have the leverage over pharmaceutical companies and hospitals, providers, to be able to negotiate better than health insurance companies. They would not have the leverage, right? And the reason, and that's one of the reasons, by the way, costs are so high now is because you have no negotiating power. Again, there are people that paid $1,200 for a Band-Aid or, $1,000 for a bag of saline. Okay. Prices are absolutely out of control. And so this would be a two-tiered healthcare system. Not to mention, again, it would be under constant Republican assault. At some point, because of all that, a public option would absolutely fail. Most likely under a Republican president because of Republican sabotage and just the general inability for a public option to solve the problems in our system. So, no, Mayor Pete, you have it completely wrong. You have to have a single-payer healthcare system. You've got to get rid of private insurance. It's the only way to actually have real universal healthcare and actually be able to control costs. It's got to be everyone in and no one out. So this plan by Buttigieg shows you exactly where he's at. Centrist, middle of the road. Let's take the existing system and tweak it just a little bit and open up Medicare for, people who are uninsured. Half measures are not going to work, man. No, we have to go full in on single payer or not do anything at all. Because we're not going to fix the system with these ridiculous half measures. Okay. All right. Let's go from half measures to full measures. All right. Senator Bernie Sanders has a new plan to not only tackle homelessness in big cities, but also to ensure people are able to get homes that they want to buy, that they can afford homes, and also to do all sorts of things. So, and I say that because this plan is incredibly comprehensive. So I want to go and give you some of the basics here. For right now, Bernie overview. Bernie is planning to spend about $2.5 trillion on this plan. Now, it's paid for by a wealth tax. So that's important, right? So let's just get that out of the way. The over 100 richest families in the country would be taxed for having wealth, and that would raise enough money to do this. Now, it's $2.5 trillion over the next 10 years. Now, how he would invest that money is as follows. He would start by investing $1.48 trillion over the next 10 years in the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund and would prioritize building 25,000 housing units during his first years in office. So units constructed with this funding, by the way, are eligible to be located in mixed income developments. Now, that's important because the whole purpose is to avoid gentrifying the area, right? It also will use federal preemption laws to ensure that these new units are not segregated or excluded by local zoning ordinances. Again, really important to try to avoid segregation, segregated housing between rich and poor, and all that. And now, of course, rich people hate this already because what they want to do is they want to be segregated from the rest of us, from everybody else. Rich people always fight against more affordable housing being put in their areas. And they don't want to be close to us poors, I guess, or people of less means. And so they always fight against this. Bernie Sanders says, no. We're going to use the federal government and we're going to put those, those mixed income houses, these developments in your area, and you're going to like it. I love it. All right, more. He also plans to invest an additional $400 billion to build 2 million mixed income social housing units to be administered through the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund. He says that plan will guarantee equity in social housing costs, ensuring no inequality of services or conditions within units. Now, he also plans to expand some federal programs here, and the first one is the USDA's Section 515 program by about $500 million. Now, that would build new affordable developments in rural areas and protect existing units from being converted to market rate housing, which, as we know right now, is fairly unaffordable for a lot of Americans. Now, this plan also ties in several ways to the Green New Deal. For one, Sanders' plan would invest about $70 billion to repair and modernize public housing, including making all public housing handicap accessible and provide access to high-speed broadband for all residents. Now, that's huge. That's really important, right? Because the internet has become a necessity to function in modern life. There was a time where you could get by without an internet connection. Now, you really can't. Most, if not all, jobs require you to apply online, and some even require you to have access to the internet. Not only that, but you also need an internet for education, for example. If you're going to college, you have to have internet. And so it's a very welcome addition, very necessary. Now, related to the Green New Deal, the plan would also electrify and decarbonize all public housing by conducting deep energy retrofits, including appliances, power, and heating, in order to, of course, save money, save power, reduce energy usage. So, like a lot of Sanders' policy proposals, they kind of make up part of a web, each depending on the other to function, right? And each kind of adding to each other. More. Sanders would also fully fund tenant-based Section 8 rental assistance at $410 billion over the next 10 years and make it a mandatory funding program for all eligible households, as well as implementing a Section 8 non-discrimination law so that landlords can no longer discriminate against low-income families based on their source of income. Now, there's a lot of tenant protections in there as well. The plan would protect tenants by implementing a just cause requirement for evictions, which would allow a landlord to evict a tenant only for specific violations and prevent landlords from evicting tenants for arbitrary or retaliatory reasons. Now, arbitrary might even include the gender, not gender, I'm sorry, the sexual orientation of people living in those houses. Now, a lot of people mistakenly think that, oh no, come on, you can't kick someone out for being gay or you know, anything like that, right? Being part of the LGBT community, being trans. No, it turns out you can, because there's no protections in a lot of places, which is why a lot of cities has had to put up their own protections. Now, so there's that. Now, one of the big pieces of the proposal in order to lower housing prices is establishing rent control. Now, the plan would enact a national cap on annual rent increases at no more than 3% or about 1.5 times the consumer price index. Now, there are waivers available, but only if significant capital improvements were made to the properties. So you'd have to make the properties pretty nice in order to be waived from that rent control. So now rent control is a bit of a contentious idea. And the reason is that it might mean rent increases in non-rent controlled units. So it might raise people's rents in other places that are not part of this affordable housing. So, you know, there is that thing to look out for, right? So now He also plans to end exclusionary and restrictive zoning ordinances and replace them with zoning that encourages racial, economic, and disability integration that would make housing more affordable. Plan also addresses redlining and gentrification, as well as protect racial minorities and LGBTQ plus communities. So it really is comprehensive. And what I just read here, really kind of scratching the surface. I would urge everyone to go and read the full plan and everything that it entails. It really is huge. It's incredible. Like most Sanders plans, it tries to cover essentially every single thing from almost every conceivable angle. Very ambitious, very progressive. Now, that means the establishment likely hates it and will do everything they can to dismiss it, while not really having their own big, bold plan. But we expect that, okay? And we understand that the establishment is, of course, not in favor of giant sweeping ideas that will disrupt the status quo. But there's a homelessness crisis in this country. It's felt in San Francisco, New York, LA, Seattle. All these big cities have a huge homelessness problem because people cannot afford homes. Now, Bernie Sanders wants to fix this problem. He wants to go to the source, and he wants to use what power he has, not market-based solutions, but what power he has in the federal government to try to protect people who and encourage people who are homeless to be able to get homes. I mean, right now, there's a fascinating statistic where there's about what 60,000 people in California that are homeless, but over 100,000 units that are empty. That's insane. You have all these houses that are empty, and you have people that are homeless. Think about that for a second. Why don't you just put people in homes? I mean, that would make the most sense. But unfortunately, that's something that we don't do in this country. Now, that's what Bernie wants to do, right? So let's look at what our president is doing. A little juxtaposition there. President Trump recently made his own remarks on homelessness and his own plans. Now, apparently, Trump told CNN reporter Daniel Dale, quote, "We have people living in our best highways, our best streets, our best entrances to buildings, where people in those buildings pay tremendous taxes, where they went to those locations because of the prestige." Notice how he's not talking about the homeless people. I mean, he says, oh, they're living in our best streets. They're living in our best doorways, best entrances to buildings. But notice in that, he doesn't care about the homeless people. He says, they're in the way. We got to get them out of the way. He said, in many cases, they come from other countries and they move to LA or they move to San Francisco because of the prestige of the city. And all of a sudden, they have tents, hundreds and hundreds of tents, and people living at the entrance to their office building. Complete and utter verbal diarrhea. But his whole problem is those poor business owners have to step over homeless people because they got the tents everywhere. You know what his plan is? To try to get homeless people off the street, put them in government facilities, or just criminalize them, and so more people get arrested. Out of sight, out of mind. That's the Trump plan. So there are two choices here in America, right? A plan that actually dives to the root, is comprehensive, and looks to try to solve the problem of homelessness, while also helping homeowners and the environment at the same time. And then we have this guy who wants to further criminalize the homeless and get them out of the way so that we just don't have to see them anymore when we go into our big office buildings. That's your choices, America. Choose wisely. All right. I don't have enough time to do the last story, so we'll save that. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. please subscribe to the channel or become a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation or become a channel member. Once again, thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you later. You have a good night.